Welcome back to the We The Patriots Podcast. I hope all of you had a wonderful Easter weekend. And if you don't celebrate, well, hope you had a good weekend in general. Today, we're going to keep it somewhat light. We have a historic space flight that we kind of have to go over, as well as some updates on some issues that I've gone over in recent weeks, including the recent incident at the Frisco High School in Texas, as well as the concerns going on with immigration and some economic concerns generally. Why don't we get right into it? My name is Sal Assante, and I'm your host. Welcome to the We The Patriots Podcast. Here we go. So, for those of you that have not been following, there was a pretty wild flight into space this last week, and I just want to thank listener Alyssa for suggesting that we talk about it this week. Although I was thinking about it, this definitely gave me the nudge to put this on the show here as the headliner. And if you are one of those listeners that has an idea of what should be talked about on the show, or maybe you think that we miscovered something, you want some more details thrown in, be sure to get into my DMs either on Instagram or on Twitter, X, or hit us up in the comments of this show or any show that you have any questions on. We'll be sure to get back to you or maybe even answer you right here on the show. So without any further ado, this space flight, what the hell happened? Well, this last week, we had 6 women fly into space. I believe there's actually more people involved, but 6 headlining women that went into space. They traveled a little bit over 60 miles. That was past the Kármán line, which is the determined line of when you actually get to no gravity. And yeah, they flew back. The trip in total took about 11 minutes or so. What was it? Do we think that it was possibly a giant networking scheme? Do we think it actually had a purpose? We're kind of going to talk about it. I'm sure you can kind of tell where I'm leaning on it. But the people that were on the flight, this is what we got. So we got Lauren Sanchez, who is the well-known at this point fiance of Jeff Bezos. But not only that, she's a journalist, philanthropist, helicopter pilot, and she actually organized the mission. We have Katy Perry, who I don't think needs any sort of description. Gail King, who's the host of CBS Mornings, and a couple of other women as well. We have Aisha Bowie, former NASA rocket scientist, first Bahamian in space. I definitely didn't say that right. Bahamas, I assume. And Amanda Nguyen, definitely didn't say that right either. Activist, astrophysicist, first Vietnamese woman in space, and Carrie Ann Flynn, a film producer. Long time she's been sharing her dreams of going into space, and she finally got to realize those dreams. So this is the first all-female space flight since there was a Soviet flight that went into space somewhere in the 1960s, I believe. It was actually Blue Origin's 11th flight. Blue Origin, of course, being the company that is owned by Jeff Bezos, one of his projects after getting out of Amazon. So what really happened? To me, it seems like and I have no problem being wrong on this, but to me, it just seems like a giant show trying to be one of those things that puts women on the forefront, as we've seen with many different marginalized groups, as I'll put it, whether it be people of different races, people of different sexes, a lot of things that kind of happen to try to be the first of something. And it seemed like this was one of those where I don't really see the benefit would be that you could make an argument that there was a lot of money wasted. I have estimates that are ranging in a lot of different ways. Somewhere as low as $1 million all the way up to somewhere around 12, 11, or $12 million that were spent on this flight. To me, it was actually one of those things where you actually get a lot of positive PR coming out of this event for Blue Origin. I could see a lot of women looking up to these 6 women and others that went into space here. And all in all, I think this could be a pretty positive thing when it's all said and done. Now, there was a lot of blowback from this, many claiming that it was faked, many claiming that there were different aspects of this that made it seem like it wasn't really a real thing that happened, most of which, as I started to research myself, seemed to be pretty easily debunked. Some things kind of pointing to different doors opening when they shouldn't be, other things that maybe pointed out different aspects that look like fake gravity happening like that. Again, all in all, it looks like those were not really true, just people trying to demean these women for doing what seems, again, to be a pretty positive thing, I would say, for not only the United States, but for the world. It's a pretty landmark thing to happen, even though they only went a few miles into space. And kind of seemed like for some of these people, like Katy Perry and as well as Miss Flynn, it seemed like it was kind of checking off a bucket list item. Now, I had a lot of people, as I was kind of scrolling through, trying to get different thoughts and opinions on this. There's a lot of people suggesting many different nefarious reasons for taking this flight. To me, again, I'm not really seeing that. What I see is a giant PR stunt that actually seems to have worked pretty well. Got a lot of attention. It was on most of the major news networks as well. Got a lot of coverage, a lot of people reporting on it. And again, to me, I kind of only see positives coming out of this. You may see a lot of conservatives that think it's a waste of money, waste of time, that they didn't really do anything in space. They just took a flight out and in. As I'm kind of gathering it, or as I'm seeing it, to me, it seems like more of an opportunity again to put women on the forefront, to show that they can do different things. They don't have to be bound down to any which of the common misconceptions that women are held down to certain aspects of life, and gives women things to aspire to. Maybe women that want to be engineering parts of our future. And honestly, good for them. Really good for them. Of course, could they have gone up and done something that could have had a little bit of an impact in space rather than just flying out and coming back? Yeah, of course. But them being the first all woman flight, I think it does go to show, and being as though it was successful, that everybody came back, everybody was safe. I think that goes to show that there is a pretty bright future for all the women who want to be involved in any sort of space engineering. And yeah, honestly, good for them. Now, the rest of the show today is going to be pretty dedicated to house cleaning. What I mean by that is we're going to be going over some things that more information has come out on, I may have been right or wrong on. And again, if you have any of those opinions where I might have been wrong about something, or I didn't get all the facts right, or more stuff came out, please get down in the comments. Let me know. I have no problem admitting that I was wrong on anything. This is just a podcast where I want to let everybody know the facts as I see them, and facts that come across that maybe not everybody is having come across their feeds, their pages, their news networks, whatever you might actually want to take in. So, with all that, let's actually start on the first piece of house cleaning, and that is going to be the continued fallout from the Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf incident. If you do not remember what that incident was about, that was a stabbing of Austin Metcalf at a track meet in Frisco, Texas, and the perpetrator, allegedly, at this point still, is Carmelo Anthony. Now, Carmelo Anthony on the site allegedly already admitted to his guilt. Remember that if you go back to my show last week, he claimed that it was him right away. He wasn't trying to argue it. He got detained. He got put underneath, I believe it was at the time, a $1 million bond or bail set, and of course, still awaiting trial. Now, the update for that is that the bond actually got lowered to $400,000, and he is now out. What's also an update to that is that allegedly the family was offered pro bono uh, lawyers, people representing Carmelo for free, of course. And what a lot of people are kind of speculating online is that it's due to the fact that this is a very high profile racial crime. And to me, I wish that things didn't go that way. It does seem like that is the way that the trial is going to go. It's going to be held all across racial lines. It does seem like they're going to be aiming for a mistrial or hung jury because, again, based on the facts that I went over last week, being as though there was a clear uh, raising of tensions by Carmelo before the stabbing, provocation as well from Carmelo's point of view, and no real clear threatening of his life by Austin. It's a pretty clear cut murder case, in my opinion. Again, I'm not trying to be divisive in this. I'm just trying to lay out the facts as I see them and the facts that we have at this moment. To me, it is a very clean cut, very clear murder case, and we'll just have to see once the trial actually happens what other facts may come out about the case, what video that is allegedly out there that nobody's seen, what it actually shows, and all these different things that come together. But there were some interesting new updates that came out kind of outside of the actual case itself. One of them being that the family of Carmelo Anthony decided to hold a press conference. Now, I have never seen a press conference held by an alleged murderer unless it was a high profile person who got alleged, someone like the ilk of an OJ Simpson. I can't guarantee that he held a press conference. I'm just giving a possible example. Other than that, when someone is alleged to have committed a crime, in most cases, that person and their family try to sink back as far out of the limelight as possible. And it's very interesting to me to see that it has been the opposite in this case. So not only did the family hold a press conference, but Austin Metcalf's father showed up at this press conference. Furthermore, the father of Austin Metcalf was subsequently kicked out of the press conference by the parents of Carmelo Anthony, and that was very interesting to me. The family went on to say that they have been receiving death threats, that the daughter, so Carmelo's sister, presumably, is feeling like she can't live in her own house, that she's receiving threats. And a lot of this is due to the unfortunate fact that I brought up last week that this trial, this whole case, is really getting acknowledged to be a racial crime, when in reality, in my opinion, this crime is a very, very simple, no race needed, no color needed to be seen crime between two parties in which one was killed. The fact that race is being brought into it is pretty obvious why. And if you've been following this show long enough, you know that I and Andrew and I have brought up this fact that many times race is brought into things in order to stir up the public. And I could not think of any other reason other than that for this case to be blowing up to the proportion that it is. And another user that I found on Instagram, I'll try to find him and tag him because he made a really good video. User pointed out that it's really weird that an incident like this going along in Texas, which maybe that might be why it's getting so much attention, because it's not happening in somewhere like Chicago or New York. But furthermore, pretty obvious reason, or at least according to this user, which I agree with, that this case is getting so much attention, especially on the national scale, is because it's race divided. It's between a black person and a white person. And you don't see cases like this that happen, you could say, make an argument, on a weekly basis, at least a monthly basis, in places like Chicago, places like Detroit, places like New York City, all the time. But most of the time, it has to do with someone of one race killing or injuring severely another person of the same race. And that might be whether that is Latino on Latino, white on white, black on black. These crimes, those examples never get the national attention that something like this incident between Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf is getting. And I couldn't agree more. I think that the biggest reason that it's getting so much attention is because both sides, and I'm talking here about the fictional creation of the left and right, but I think it's more so dividing along the racial lines, the white and the black. When you have that opportunity to create division, sow hatred into a narrative between two different sets of people, you, as a part of the media, have a massive opportunity to get attention for your show, for whatever piece of media that you're putting out, whether it's publication, you're putting it out in written word, or you're doing something like a podcast, you're doing something like a news show that's on all sorts of different stations, whatever it might be. You have an opportunity, if you're going to try to divide people along the racial lines, to get a lot of attention on not only yourself, but whatever publication you are working for or you're doing on your own right. And I think it's despicable. I think it does not actually head towards any sort of way of helping the country. And again, it goes against everything that, not that I have a lot of pull in this world, at least not at this point. The podcast is not massive, but I do take it upon myself to make sure that I'm showing and giving to you, the audience, the facts of every single angle, and to the best of my ability, giving you an opportunity to make a decision for yourself and not trying to make up your mind. The only thing that I really am hoping to convey in this situation is that, and I do believe this, that it does seem like this incident that happened in Frisco is a clear-cut murder case. And if we can't view that as a society and come together and agree that what was done between the two parties was wrong, and it escalated to a level of violence that is completely unnecessary at a school, let alone anywhere else in life, if we can't come to agree upon this, then I think that the fabric that we have here in America is deeply, deeply broken. And it's something that's going to take many, many decades, if not hundreds of years, to fix. And we've already been trying to patch up these racial tensions and these dividing lines that have been set for really hundreds of years since the creation of this country. And it's sad to see that there's so many people willing to go out on a limb and try to so in more of that division because it's so obvious depending on which side of the aisle you are looking at. One of the big things that you can go take a look at if it's still up, which I could be wrong, I believe it's still up, but they may have taken it down at this point, is the donation page for Carmelo Anthony. That point At this point, I should say, it is nearing a $500,000 goal that was set by the organizers of the donation page. And if you can go through and scroll through the comments that were left along with donations, it is some very divisive words being used, very blatantly throwing away the fact that somebody was murdered in cold blood, almost cheering on the fact that someone was killed, and rooting for this person, Carmelo Anthony, to not only receive freedom, but cheering him on and telling him that he did a great thing. And to me, if you look back on the show that we did uh, in regards to the CEO of United Health Services that got killed, it's the same type of really wording that's coming across from people all over Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, that were promoting that murder of a CEO in a circumstance in which I just cannot fathom that most Americans agree with. But that being said, if you have the ability to raise $500,000 over killing someone, I think that goes to show how divided we are as a nation. And I just implore you, all of you out there that are listening to the show, again, go, if you don't believe something that I'm saying, go look it up, go try to disprove me, put facts into the comments to try to at least enlighten me some more. But from what I'm seeing, we need to come together as Americans, as I stated in last week's show, as I've been stating for quite some time here. We need to come together and kind of decide where we want to be as a country. Because if we want to be a country that's known as a bunch of bandits, a bunch of murderers, assassins, then really we need to continue along the way that we're going. But if you don't feel safe in America as it is today, if you don't feel like you are in a country that supports your values, then you need to be the one that's going to start to invoke some change. And I think that's where we're at today. And we need to start to right this ship before we're heading in an even darker direction, which unfortunately is how I'm seeing it. And it's not how I want to see things post Easter, post such a wonderful holiday in the Christian faith, at least Catholic for myself. Such a gorgeous holiday. And to be looking at the world and realistically the United States outlook as it is right now is deeply saddening to someone like myself. And honestly, a lot of people that share the faith with myself, or maybe you don't believe in anything that's in terms of Christian, but if you are a believer and you are a person of faith, I can't imagine that you're happy with the outlook of things today. So before I move on to the final part of the show where I want to discuss some more of the immigration situation, in particular with Abrego Garcia, I do want to talk a little bit about the looming recession that we have, according to many economical experts. I want to just start by asking you a very simple question and see how you guys feel. Is the recession actually looming over our heads, or is it too early to panic? And I'll give my honest opinion. My honest opinion is it's far too early to panic. The reason being is that we just had the Q1 data come out. Didn't really show, in my opinion, I am no economics expert, I'm not claiming to be, didn't really show that we're heading towards a dark time, depression type of era, but it didn't look like things were heading to a possible recession. And reason being is that unemployment data didn't look great. CPI is looking a little bit better. Consumer Price Index, CPI, are not aware. That is basically the ability of your money today, what it's actually able to buy in comparison to years past. And GDP growth, of course. Now, you're looking at these indicators is really the best way to determine whether we're heading into a recession. It's not following the stock market, no matter what anybody wants to say, or if anybody wants to talk about Trump crashing the stock market or manipulating it, which I'll get into in a minute here. That is not actually an indicator for economic health. So regardless of if we dropped, Dow's up somewhere near 50,000 points today, whether we drop down to 20,000, that's not actually an indicator of whether we're heading into recession. It's really not. And really just want to pass that message off to you guys. I've talked about the stock market and the economy in general multiple times. Again, I'm not claiming to be an expert, but I do know some very surface level things. And one thing that I know is that whether you are an investor or not, what you should know about the stock market itself is this. And this is coming from the book, The Intelligent Investor. I highly recommend, if you're interested in the markets, to invest in that book. It is a older book. It is a tough read. I believe Warren Buffett has put out a more modernized version of it. Highly recommend that version for anybody in this day and age that's looking to just introduce themselves to investing, not sure where to go. Go look at this book. But The description of the stock market that I want to pass on to you guys is, and I believe I've done this before, but if I haven't, shame on me. This is the description as it goes in The Intelligent Investor, and I'm paraphrasing to the best of my ability. The stock market is like a crazy neighbor, and we'll talk about that crazy neighbor in terms of maybe he's selling his house. Some days he shouts out numbers. Well, every day he shouts out numbers at random of what he'd be willing to sell his house at. And I want you to view the stock market like this crazy neighbor. And some days this crazy neighbor is coming out and saying these wildly high prices, 3 million, 4 million, $7 million for my house. And you're going to walk out, take a look at his house and recognize that that house is in no way, shape or form worth 1, 2, $7 million, nowhere in the ballpark. But other days he comes out and it's wildly low. He's saying 150,000, $200,000 for my house. And you might take a look at that same house and say, you know what? I might be willing to make that investment and buy his house on that day. The only real difference between the stock market and that crazy neighbor that's selling his house is the stock market is representing companies that are selling investment into their own company, whether you want to become a shareholder or not. Realistically, that representation was one of the best explanatory pieces of what the stock market really is doing. There is a lot of numbers that back up why a stock price might go up or down, but there's also a lot of assumptions being made on giant investing firms, places like BlackRock or Vanguard, Fidelity, places like this. All these places are making huge investments with money that we'll never see in our lifetimes. And in a lot of cases, they're making assumptions. They're not really going off of data to back it up. And there's a lot of different ratios and numbers that they can claim to be using. But in many cases, the stock price is not really relative to these underlying numbers anymore. There's a lot of times where you are looking at going back 50 or 60 years where it would almost make sense or be very close to making sense as to why a stock was priced at the price that it is. And nowadays, those numbers seem to be just kind of out in the wind. So, understanding that the stock market really isn't a great representation of either a company's health or the overall market health of the country is very important. Now, as we look at these underlying numbers and why you should be a little bit more concerned about those, when you see something like unemployment going up, and a lot of the numbers that we are seeing as indicators seem to be, I'm not claiming to know the exact answer here, but seem to be based on a lot of the cuts that Trump and his administration are making in terms of the federal opportunities in the government, that makes sense why we might see unemployment going up. And also understand that unemployment is based on the people that are actually seeking jobs. It doesn't actually represent the total number of Americans that don't have a job. Understand that. Understand too that there are many people in this country that have 2 jobs, 3 jobs in order to either excel in the economy or whether they need those 2 jobs to stay afloat. There are many other people that are in that situation as well. When you look at consumer price index, a lot of those numbers are manipulated. When you look at GDP growth, a lot of those numbers are manipulated, and these numbers feed off of each other. Basically, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to tell you is never panic when it comes to the economy. When all of a sudden you are trying to go to your local store and you're not allowed to purchase something like toilet paper, and I'm referencing pretty strictly something like COVID. Let's say that you can't purchase toilet paper. You can't purchase obvious necessities. The price of eggs are up to $8, $9 like they were in the beginning of this year. I'm not saying that's a time to panic, but that is a time to do your research, see what's going on. Maybe you need to be more prepared. At this point in time, we are not in that scenario. The price of eggs have actually dropped considerably. There seems to be quite a good number of explanations as to why the price of eggs went up so much. We can understand that as a people and not panic. And I encourage you as the listener to go get more information than I'm giving you here. I'm not trying to claim that I'm being totally accurate. I'm trying to convey information as I understand it as best I can to you. And I guarantee you I'm getting something wrong here. So please, if you have better information than me, or you go do your own research and you find something, leave a comment here, hit me on the DMs. Like I said, there will be links in the description to all that. And feel free. Try to get involved here on this conversation and let's try to get to a better understanding point when it comes to the economic health of the United States, because I truly believe that there is no reason to panic at this point. Now, are there some wild decisions being made? Yeah. And I did talk about those a couple of weeks ago when it comes to Trump's tariffs. What happened with those? I do want to explain before I move on here. As it seems to me, there was a pretty concerted effort by Trump and the administration to manipulate the stocks. And why do I say that? Well, he gave these massive broad tariffs that went out to every country, minimum baseline of 10% to every country. Some countries never had a tariff on them. Some of them were being increased from a low number up to 10%. Some of them got hit with way higher percentages than 10%. Think about China, which is now, I believe, over 100% in tariffs. There is really no good reason, in my opinion, to utilize tariffs in the way that Trump is doing it, unless you're trying to lower or eliminate something like an income tax. But here's the caveat there: revenue in the federal government actually rests itself on Congress. Congress has the ability to levy taxes. So no matter what Trump wants to do, even if he's trying to utilize tariffs in order to ratchet these things up and be able to get a better deal for the American people or reduce income taxes, he's going to have to go through the Congress anyway. And in my opinion, I don't think you'll have even close to a majority. You'll probably have a pretty significant minority of the Congress that's willing to support replacing income taxes with tariffs. And the reason being is so much of our federal dollar comes from the incoming dollars to the federal government comes from the income tax itself. Not only the income tax, but payroll taxes, things like Social Security, all of these dollars come in. And if they were to just remove those, our federal government, if it didn't downsize by orders of magnitude, we'd be looking at economic crisis immediately. So basically what I'm trying to say is it seems like the tariffs were misplaced. And what you also saw was a release of the tariffs. Now, it was allegedly temporary for the next 90 days, and the only one that remains with high tariffs or any tariffs at all is China. I could be wrong on that. Now, that might just be saying that it went back to the levels pre-Trump. Very possible. But from what I've heard, the rates that he was proposing went away, and the only one that's remaining is China. Not only that, coupled with this was a post sent out by Trump himself on, I believe, only his Truth Social, but it may have been on X, Twitter as well. This would be a great time to buy. And this is a direct quote from him. And I believe it was within 90 minutes that that announcement was made that we would be halting tariffs. And immediately, from all of that crashing that the economy did, I just misspoke there, the stock market did, I believe that overall we're looking at something like an average of between 20 and 25%. Stock market rose in one day up 10%. To me, again, I am kind of claiming that there's some sort of manipulation there. There were definitely a lot of people in Congress who made a profit off of that trade. Now, how egregious it was, were people just taking Trump's word for it and taking a guess? I don't know. I didn't personally capitalize on it, so I'm a little bit upset about it. But at the end of the day, what I'm more concerned about is any sort of stock manipulation that might have been aimed at gaining, Trump investors, Trump buddies, people in the inner circle there, an opportunity to buy stock at a great price, knowing that there was an automatic 10% bump. And I believe by the end of the week there, it went up somewhere near 18%, almost close to 20%. Now, what you also need to understand is that if you see a decrease in stock price of 20% in one week, and then the next week it goes up 20%, that recovery of 20% is not going to be equal to the original price. And why is that? I hope that you guys are understanders of math at least somewhat well, but let's just take a very obvious example. Let's say 20% goes away from 100. Say the total stock market was only worth $100 per share. You bought at 100 and it went down 20%. That would be going all the way down to $80. But now let's imagine that something happens where immediately that's going to jump back up 20%. Well, that 20% is going to be based off of 80, not 100. You're not getting the 20 back. What you're actually getting is 16. And at the end of the day, you lost somewhere in the ballpark of $4. Now, again, that's a very oversimplification, but what I hope you're understanding is a crash like 20% and then a recovery of 20% based on the crash is not going to get your money back. You're actually going to need a recovery of somewhere in the ballpark of 25 to 30% to get your money back to where it needed to be. That's where we sit today. We sit somewhere in a recovery rate of 20% from its bottom point, and we are still looking at numbers that are not as high as they were originally. And to me, that's pretty well understood by the fact that China is still getting walloped by these tariffs. And I think that it was, in my opinion, a very poor policy on Trump's part. Again, you can make the argument that maybe he was trying to remove an income tax, remove another type of tax from the American people, but given as though we have not received any information leading us down that decision tree, it kind of just makes you wonder what the hell was he doing? And I'm not a huge supporter, But at the end of the day, what I want you to understand is there's really no reason to be panicking at this point. What I might be saying is getting a little closer to a panic point is if Trump reinstates all of these tariffs that he was trying to do, heavy tariffs on places like Vietnam, China, places that realistically never had that high of a tariff, and we're not going to be able to compete in those markets. As I talked about a couple of weeks ago in the show directly relating to tariffs, there are certain products that we just don't make in the United States. And not only are we not going to be able to compete, I don't even think that we're going to be able to make certain products at this point in America due to the massive factor of cost that labor is. So, hoping that Trump comes to his senses, that the administration steers him in a better direction when it comes to tariffs, I think that we're going to see a little bit of a leveling out, and hopefully this 90-day pause leads to an extended pause and a full stop of massive tariff increases. Now, to get on to the closing point of the show, the Abrego Garcia situation. So what happened here, to me, this was pretty embarrassing on the United States part. For one, I think I was pretty vocal and pretty open and honest with you guys that I thought that President Trump was the better choice over Kamala Harris. Now, that does not mean that I'm not going to criticize Trump. And as I hope you can tell by the last segment, I have no problem criticizing this guy. What's the issue here? Now, my biggest issue with this whole thing is that it seems to be a PR stunt, for lack of better term. Abrego Garcia was sent back to Salvador about 3 weeks ago. I made the case last week about how his lawyer came on the show. Of course, she's going to give a pretty biased opinion about this, but all in all, most of what the determining factor of whether Garcia was a gang member or a member of what is called MS-13, most of the assumptions were being made off the fact that he had a Chicago Bulls hat, which to me is fucking absurd. Just absurd. Now, since then, and even directly after the deportation of Garcia, there was a announcement coming from the Trump administration saying that this was a mistake. It was a administrative mistake and that this was not done on purpose, so to speak. Given the fact that there was non-deportation orders given to for Garcia and previous rulings by judges that he can't be deported or he should not be deported, he was deported anyway. Now, since then, even though they admitted to a mistake, there have been quite a few developments. Number one is, I believe the day that I posted the show last week, Trump actually met with the El Salvador president, and both of them claimed that they really couldn't do anything about the fact that Garcia's in a wildly inhumane jail. Didn't really matter, that they weren't going to be able to facilitate it. Another thing that came out was that the Supreme Court came out in a 9-0 decision saying that Trump had to facilitate a return. Now, that is pretty vague language. If you go and read the decision, it wasn't an awfully long one. Facilitating return just means that the way that I read it, and again, I am no expert in this, the way that I read it is that Trump needs to do everything in his power to try to get Garcia back. That does not mean that he needs to get to the end of getting him back. That means that he needs to do everything in his power to try. Now, with that being said, a 9-0 decision pointing to the fact that Garcia should be returned should be pretty eye-opening to someone or anybody in the Trump administration that they made a mistake here. And yet Trump actually doubled down on the deportation. Even after his administration admitted a mistake, he came out with damning evidence, and I put that in quotes on purpose, damning evidence that Garcia is actually a gang member, tried to double down on the Bulls hat situation, and he also tried to double down on this tattoo that he has on his knuckles. Now, if you go and look it up, I don't think that I'll be able to represent it perfectly here because I'm forgetting some of the symbols, but one of them being a smiley face, the other one being a skull. Basically, Trump is trying to tell you that the different symbols that are tattooed on Garcia's hand are spelling out MS-13. And to me, it's pretty presumptuous. I think that Trump is just trying to save face, that he's trying to put this issue in the back burner and possibly even throw it off the stove completely. To me, I just think it's pretty embarrassing. When you look at the actual facts of the case, it's embarrassing. Now, some have come out with different allegations against Garcia, one of them being that the woman that he married, that they're allegedly no longer together, that the woman was made multiple claims of domestic violence, that she tried to get away from his violence. That may be true. And to be honest, if there's any case that Trump needs to make, that's the case that needs to be made, not the fact that he thinks he's in a gang, because the evidence that came out with that, and they did publish this, the White House published this, I believe, was that they have an informant that claims that they know that Garcia is a part of the gang, and it's anonymous. And when you have someone like that, it's like anonymous sources, that sounds a lot like all the hit pieces that came out on Trump that us as Trump supporters were made out to believe that they're all full of crap. That because they're from anonymous sources, people that are not willing to put their name to these allegations, that they don't really have much backing. And now you see the Trump administration doing the same thing in the other direction. Again, to me, it really seems like a PR stunt trying to save face. And it's pretty disgusting to see Trump kind of utilizing the same tactic that was used against him. And again, if you're paying attention to all the slander that came out over the years, much like the Russia hoax, you kind of see him using it in a reverse way, and it's pretty embarrassing. I think it's pretty embarrassing for Trump. I hope that he reneges on his decision, but it sure doesn't seem like it. And yeah, still at this point, we are seeing Abrego Garcia staying in El Salvador. Now, Maryland Senator Van Hollen actually went down to El Salvador, met with Abrego Garcia, and to me that seemed, again, like a PR stunt going the other direction. What it's seeming like to me, if I'm just going to be completely honest with you guys, number one, the whole situation is kind of disgusting. Number two, it kind of throws me off into thinking that this whole situation is a giant pot of crap, that there's going to be really no facts that come out on the case, that there's really not going to be a real determination to be made. And unfortunately, like I said last week, it seems like this case is going to be heavily utilized by the left in this country. Put the left in quotations for those of you that are listening. Basically, people that are just claiming that deportations should be gone against. Here's my issue with that. As I think I brought up last week, is that the deportations are not happening at any rate that's even equaling Biden, Obama, Trump in his first term even. Deportations are far down. And if that's going to continue to be the case, you have a losing argument, I believe, from Trump's side, that you were really trying to weed out the bad actors, because at this point, there are so many illegal immigrants, some estimates going as high as 30 to 40 million people that are illegally in this country. And if you're a believer in getting these people out that did not come here legally in order to, facilitate a proper immigration system, he needs to do a better job in making sure that he does his checks and balances on every single case. I think back to something that I believe it was Abraham Lincoln that was going over different possibilities of executions when it was a situation that he could not be close to out in the Midwest. And he oversaw every single case that was laid out to him who was a trusted underling. And he actually made decisions to save certain people. And again, I could be wrong on that Abraham Lincoln. This might have been Ulysses S. Grant. It's one of the two people. I think that Trump needs to take that mode of action. Now, clear criminals, people who have been either arrested or alleged of things like murder, rape, I think those are clear cut and you could just send them. That's great. You see the verified paperwork. They did this thing. Okay, great. You have something like Abrego Garcia that came into this country, was fleeing a gang himself from El Salvador. You have a stay of deportation orders from judges. And not only that, multiple judges ruled on the fact that he should not be deported back to El Salvador, and he did it anyway. This was a mistake. I do think that Trump had the ability to stop this one particular case if he really cared. And at the end of the day, given that it does not seem like he's deporting people in any way, shape, or form at a rate that will actually solve the issue that we're having in this country. And not only that, seems to be going willy-nilly with no real direction. I can't really get on the side of Trump on this one, and I hope that he does a better job going forward. That's all I got for you guys today. Actually, went a lot longer than I wanted to, so I'm just going to wrap this up. But what I do want to let you know is that there will be an additional show coming out this week, and it will be on 9/11, believe it or not. There have been a couple of interesting new updates to the situation, believe it or not, a situation that is going on being 24 years old. And it's pretty shocking. Things that I'm not going to be putting on places like YouTube or Spotify. So if you want to go hear that episode, please be sure to go subscribe to the Substack that we are posting now for We The Patriots. That will be posted in the link in the description. Love you guys to come over there, get a look at our first piece of content that's actually substantive over there. And I can't wait to see you guys. Until then, I will be catching you guys next week. I'm your host, Sal Assante. This has been We The Patriots Podcast. I thank you so much for listening.
I wish I were the fucking state. I wanna be something, not nothing. Trapped inside my dream and I'm running away from these demons. But the feeling's so good, I'ma keep dreaming.